You need to start covering more if you want us to move forward, she said, flat and certain, like it was already settled. We were sitting at the kitchen table we bought together, the cheap one that wobbled unless you folded a napkin under one leg. She didn't look angry. She looked administrative, like she was updating a spreadsheet and my name was just a line item. She explained it calmly. Her hours were unstable. Her career was in transition. It made sense for me to handle most of the bills for a while. Rent, utilities, groceries, the car insurance she used more than I did. She framed it as teamwork, but it landed like a demand. I asked what a while meant. She shrugged and said, "Until things even out." That was when I asked to see her budget. She laughed at first, like I was being cute. Then she rolled her eyes and said she didn't track things the way I did. Money stressed her out. She trusted me to handle it. That trust, apparently, included me not asking questions. Within the first 10 minutes of that conversation, I knew something was off. We'd been living together for almost 3 years, shared finances in the practical sense, even if we kept separate accounts. I paid the rent because my credit was better. She sent me her half every month, or she used to. I pulled up our joint expense app on my phone, the one she'd insisted we use after moving in together because transparency matters. I scrolled back a few months. Her transfers had been late, then smaller, then skipped entirely. She leaned back in her chair while I looked, arms crossed, jaw tight. When I pointed it out, she said she'd been meaning to tell me. That's when the second problem surfaced. She had credit card debt. Not a little. Not a one-time emergency. Thousands. Multiple cards. Late fees. Minimum payments she'd been floating by juggling due dates. I asked her how long this had been going on. She said, "It's under control." I asked her why I didn't know. She said, "Because you'd freak out." That answer stuck with me more than the number. This wasn't about bad luck or a missed paycheck. She'd been spending. Clothes, trips, dinners out with coworkers, little treat-yourself charges that added up fast when you weren't the one planning to pay them back. She admitted she'd assumed we'd merge finances soon anyway. I asked what that meant. She said, "I figured once we were serious, it wouldn't be so separated." We were serious. That's what scared me. The ultimatum suddenly made sense. This wasn't a temporary ask. It was a bridge. Once I stepped onto it, there was no going back to separate responsibility. Her debt would quietly become ours. Her spending would stay her choice. The pressure would stay on me. I told her I wasn't comfortable increasing my share without understanding everything first. She didn't yell. She sighed. Hard. Like I'd disappointed her. She said I was being rigid. That relationships required flexibility. That she'd supported me emotionally when I was stressed at work. And now I was nickel and diming her. I reminded her I wasn't asking her to cover me. I was asking for honesty. She looked at the clock and said she didn't have time for this right now. Over the next week, the pattern became clearer. Bills came due and she'd casually ask if I could just handle it this time. Groceries landed in the cart with the expectation I'd pay. She stopped transferring her share altogether and waited to see if I'd bring it up. When I did, she acted confused, like she'd forgotten. One night, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. A notification popped up from a payment app. Another minimum payment, another card I didn't know about. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't need to. I sat on the couch and did the math in my head. If I agreed to her terms, I'd be covering nearly everything within 6 months. If I didn't, I'd be the bad guy holding her back. There was no version of this where the pressure decreased. I tried one more conversation. I asked her to list everything out. All debts, all expenses, a plan. She said that felt controlling. She said if I loved her, I wouldn't make her feel like a liability. The word love had turned into leverage. By the end of that night, she repeated the ultimatum, softer this time but firmer underneath. Either I stepped up financially or I was showing her where she stood. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just listened. And for the first time since we moved in together, I started thinking about what would happen if I stopped absorbing the impact of her choices. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked if I'd seen her charger, and mentioned we were low on coffee. It was a quiet assumption that I'd pick it up on my way home, like I always did. I didn't. That night, I brought the conversation back up, calmly. I told her I wasn't agreeing to take on more without a clear plan, and full transparency. I said I wasn't comfortable being the safety net for debt I didn't know existed. She didn't meet me halfway. She doubled down. She said I was making money the villain, that couples didn't keep score, that she felt judged in her own home. She told me if I couldn't handle temporary imbalance, I wasn't ready for a future together. That word again, future, always vague, always just out of reach. When I asked what sacrifices she was willing to make to balance things, she looked genuinely offended. She said she already felt stressed and cutting back would kill her mentally. She needed support, not conditions. That was the moment something settled for me. There was no endpoint to this, no finish line where things magically evened out. The pressure wasn't situational, it was structural. As long as I absorbed it, it would continue. I told her I wasn't increasing my financial contribution. She stared at me for a few seconds, then said, "So you're really choosing money over us?" I didn't correct her. I didn't explain again. I just said I was choosing responsibility for myself. She went quiet, cold. For the next few days, she barely spoke to me unless it was logistical. When she did, it was edged with irritation. Doors closed harder. Sighs were louder. Groceries she picked up were only things she liked, paid for separately, and labeled in the fridge with passive comments about fairness. At the end of the week, the rent notification hit my phone. Normally, she'd already sent her share. This time, nothing. I waited a day, then another. When I asked her about it, she said she thought I'd decided to help more, given my stance on the relationship. That was it. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I told her I'd cover my half, like always. Nothing more. She laughed, sharp and disbelieving, and said that wasn't how shared living worked. That if I wanted to act single, maybe I should live that way. So I did. That night, I opened a new checking account and rerouted my direct deposit. I canceled every shared subscription under my name. Streaming, food delivery, the gym membership she rarely used but insisted we keep because it was a couple of thing. I paid my portion of the rent directly to the landlord the next morning, with a note clarifying the split. Then I started packing. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just boxes, one by one. Clothes first, work stuff, things that were clearly mine. I didn't touch the shared furniture or anything we bought together. She noticed on the second day. She asked what I was doing, like it was a joke. I told her I was making space. She accused me of blindsiding her, of punishing her instead of talking it through, of abandoning her over numbers on a screen. I reminded her I had talked, multiple times. By the end of that week, I had lined up a short-term place across town. Nothing fancy. Month to month. Close enough to work. Quiet. I told her I'd be out by Sunday and that I'd continue paying only my agreed portions until the lease ended. No more. No less. She went from angry to panicked fast. She asked how she was supposed to manage everything alone. She asked if I expected her to fail. She asked if this was my way of forcing her to change. I said no. I said this was me stepping out of a situation I couldn't carry anymore. On Sunday evening, I loaded the last box into my car. She stood in the doorway and told me I was making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. The first real consequence hit 2 days later when she texted me asking if I could spot her the full utility bill because it had bounced. I didn't reply. Final update. I didn't respond to the utility text, and I didn't explain why. There was nothing left to clarify. I'd already said what I was willing to cover, and I was covering it exactly. 2 days after that message, the landlord emailed both of us. Rent hadn't been paid in full. He was polite, professional, and very clear about late fees and timelines. I replied with confirmation of my transfer and attached the receipt. I didn't add commentary. She replied separately. I never saw what she wrote, but I could tell by the next few weeks that it hadn't solved anything. Her tone changed after that. The anger drained out and something more frantic took its place. She started texting me updates I hadn't asked for. How she was waiting on a paycheck, how a card had been declined at the grocery store, how she was trying to figure things out. I didn't block her, I just didn't engage. Within a month, the shared systems started failing one by one. Her phone plan lapsed because it had been bundled under my account. I'd warned her weeks earlier that I was canceling it. She hadn't believed I would. She emailed me asking if I could call the carrier and fix it just until she got paid. I didn't. The car insurance renewal came up next. I'd removed myself and paid my portion ahead of time, exactly as agreed. Her premium jumped without the multi-driver discount. She complained it wasn't fair. I didn't respond. The credit card companies were less patient. She started missing minimums. Fees stacked. Interest compounded. One afternoon, she showed up at my office unannounced, eyes red, voice low, asking if we could talk like adults. I stepped outside so she wouldn't make a scene. She told me she was overwhelmed, that everything had hit at once, that she hadn't realized how much I'd been quietly handling. She said she wasn't asking for a handout, just time. I told her I'd already given time, years of it. She asked if I really wanted to watch her struggle. I said I wasn't watching. I was living my own life now. After that, she stopped showing up and started spiraling publicly instead. Mutual friends reached out, confused. She'd been venting about how I abandoned her financially, how I left her in a lease she couldn't afford, how I cared more about money than people. I didn't correct the narrative. Anyone who knew me well enough also knew the pattern. Quietly, a few people stopped inviting her places. A couple of them asked me privately if she'd always been like that with money. I said yes. The lease ended without drama from my side. I paid my half through the final month on time. She scrambled, took on a roommate she'd once mocked for being unreliable, sold furniture she'd insisted we needed, moved credit balances around like puzzle pieces. By the time I came by to collect the last of my mail, the apartment felt smaller, louder, less stable. She wasn't there, but the signs were obvious. Notices on the counter, cheap takeout containers, that hollow feeling of someone always catching up. I didn't feel vindicated, I felt confirmed. The pressure I'd been carrying hadn't disappeared. It had just transferred back to its original owner. Months later, I heard she'd moved again. Then again. Job changes. Short-term fixes. The same cycle, just without me absorbing the shock. My life got quieter. My finances stabilized in ways they hadn't while I was supporting someone who refused accountability. I slept better, planned long-term again, trusted my instincts more. I didn't win anything in a dramatic sense. There was no final confrontation, no apology, no closure conversation. There was just distance. And in that distance, everything finally balanced itself out.